Shout nearly won Worlds, and I'm finally back in Australia, here to talk to you guys about the deck that I brought for the BCS 24-25 World Finals for the premium format. And it is a very unconventional deck that I personally would never thought I would be playing, and it is Nova Grappler, but a very different build of Nova Grappler, Shout Mill. So a lot of people have been talking about this all over the internet and just kind of wondering what the heck this deck does. So here we go. This is the deck profile, but first of all, no pun intended, shout out to a few people that pretty much made this deck work, and without them I wouldn't be sitting here third place in the world. So first of all, to Stephen Lee, he gets all the credit on this deck. That guy shared a list that used a lot of new cards with the old loop, and this loop was actually found out ages ago. And I was like, you know what? I kind of have to play an unfair deck because Fenrir is in the room, and Ned is the guy, the world champ, is the guy to beat. So, you know, thought I'd play a unfair deck, and, you know, he gave me the list, and yeah, I pretty much optimized on the initial list. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. Shout out to Nick, Andrew, Carmelo, Anson, and Norman for pretty much getting me all the pieces that I guess Joshua Lee mostly used as well. We pretty much played the same 66. And yeah, big shout out to them, because without them, I wouldn't have pretty much the components for the deck that I'm playing for the World Finals. Big shout out to David Adipratama, or Wirab, for giving me a pep talk mid-tournament. I called him and he pretty much gave me a rundown of how to play the Fenrir matchup. It did really help in the top 4, but unfortunately I lost that. And I think there were a few misplays there or something, but you know, it is what it is. And then lastly, to my brothers Rickson and Joshua Lee, without them, this deck would never have gotten to how optimized it is. We pretty much spent the whole trip in Sapporo and Nagoya figuring out this list, figuring out the lines for this deck, and there's just so many intricate stuff. And yeah, we both played it. Well, actually all three of us played it, and it was just so fun to play because Shout is pretty much a mini game in itself. So let's jump to a different screen. This is pretty much the list, or the first framework that Steven provided me. Again, big credit to him for providing me this. But the framework played a few different things that I obviously didn't play in my list that I played for Worlds. So the first one being the Dark States Grand Gate Dual Nation. This allows you to essentially salvage a grade 2 or greater unit from your soul back to hand, but more importantly, it looks at the top card of your deck and puts it into soul. Soul is a very important resource for this deck, and this card essentially does that. Other things that he ran was the Solidar Bengal. So essentially allows you to look at the top 3 cards of your deck and add a card to hand. More importantly, it puts a card into soul, which, you know, soul again is a very important resource. But in conjunction with Valtrosa, allows you to look at the top 8 cards of your deck for a combo piece that you want. He also ran 3 PGs, whereas I ran 4 and substituted for the 1 Sar Blauglands. Sar is a very good card when the meta is Link Joker. Essentially, it allows you to unlock stuff, and yeah, that's pretty much the main reason, right? But anyways, the card itself, yes, it does go into soul. Yes, it does countercharge, which essentially gives you all of the resources that you need. Steven did also play the Elder Breath. Sometimes you just need to win a normal game and flip the OT, but I found that in my testing, the likelihood of you getting into a situation where you need to win a normal game is when your opponent bricks, and when your opponent bricks, you get the buffer to be able to get all your combo pieces anyways. Evident in the top 8 game that I played at Worlds on stream. There's a few other things that he ran as well. So 1 extra Merciless, the favorite champ. Favorite champ is a pretty easy way to, you know, keep attacking with your Vanguard. It is a pretty good stride, especially if Shout builds up a hand. It essentially gets to 0 drives and you just keep attacking with your Vanguard. He also ran Meteor Kaiser Victor. This is essentially an on-hit to restand, but more importantly, it flips. But I didn't find very much use for it. And an extra Gundreed as well. And that is pretty much the initial framework. So let's go through the deck that I brought for Worlds. I'll show you guys essentially how the loop works and I guess the role of each card in the deck. So first off, we have Beast Deity, White Tiger. This is your main starter, very important to use with Scarlet Bird because Scarlet Bird allows you to draw 1 if you stand 2 or more rear guards, and this card is in Soul. So very, very important. So yeah, we definitely play the 1 White Tiger there. One of your biggest combo pieces in the deck is Petite Ace. So why is this card ran? And it is because Petite Ace allows you to force rest a rear guard, and that allows you to force rest your Centaur. So essentially it has 2 skills, Act Rear Guard GB1. You can counterblast 1, rest this unit, stand 1 of your rear guards, and if that unit has the rush ability, they increase the power by this unit's power until the end of turn, and then retire this at the end of it. The retirement happens regardless of what rear guard you stand. And yeah, that's pretty much the first skill. The second skill is Act Rear Guard. Choose 1 of your rear guards and rest it. This unit gains plus 3k until the end of turn. Both of these skills are not once per turn, but obviously when you retire this unit, then you only ever get to use that unit's effect once. But the second effect is really the main point of the use of this card, to essentially rest Centaur, but we'll talk about Centaur's role a little bit later. Then we run 4 of G Victor. This is really important for when you ride up to grade 3. You essentially can do the loop the moment when you reach grade 3. The ability to be able to use your history collection stride allows you to essentially generate 2 Excel circles, activate GB2, which means that you have the ability to activate all of your GB skills, so like your Petite Ace, your Centaurs, and then having 2 extra Excel circles means that the more shouts that you get, the more effective the loop becomes. So Victor itself doesn't really come up as in the on-stride or any of the GB2 effects because you're never attacking anyways, but yeah, it is really important to be running this card and then essentially getting the 2 excels the moment when you ride to grade 3. Do note that the only way to get excels is to use this with Vic10, and it is meant to make the deck faster because you're getting to your win con faster. So that's Victor. The 1 Regalis place that we ran, that I ran, is Radiance Caliburn. Essentially, it allows you to draw 2 or put this card into someone counter-edge 1. Both effects are really good. Drawing 2 means that you can draw 2 of your combo pieces, or you know, if you have all your combo pieces, this can just go into soul, giving you 1 soul for additional resources so that you can fulfill the loop and countercharge 1 as well. So Radiance Caliburn, an insane Regalis piece for this deck, and definitely a mainstay unless I guess another Regalis piece comes out. There was a discussion for whether I could use the Fire Regalis, but I felt that being able to have the option to draw 2 or to put it into Soul and countercharge 1 is just much better. Then we have one of our most important cards that obviously we didn't have, you know, a couple years ago, and that is Valtrosa and Liel. So Valtrosa is an insane card in 2 ways. So the first one is you bottom deck a card that is a non-sentinel, and you essentially put it to the bottom of the deck. This is really important, especially in the later game when you are trying to close the gap between your opponent's deck and yours. So you have to take into consideration the deficit count, so how much more deck your opponent has, and this card allows you to close the gap by putting a card to the bottom of the deck. Additionally, this card is a combo piece searcher, so essentially you bottom deck a card, you can blast 1, look at top 5 for one of your combo pieces hopefully, and then call it out to rearguard. So when you are in the later parts of the game, this card is really good because it can search a lot of your restanders like Arnis, your Scarlet Birds, which is what I did in the top 8 match against Ground Blue, which allows you to restand your whole board without needing the Scarlet Bird in hand. So the applications of this card is just ridiculous in this deck, and this is pretty much the reason why the deck works. So that is Valtrosa. So the next part of the combo piece is Spurt Centaur. So Spurt Centaur's ability is Rush, Rearguard, GB1, Soul Blast 1, and choose one of your other rearguards in the same column as this unit and return it to hand. So when this unit is stood by the effect of your card, you may pay the cost. If you do, this unit gains plus 5k. The power does not matter. But the fact that you bounce a rearguard in the same column as this unit, you're essentially pairing this with Scarlet Bird, which means that you get to resend all of your shouts, and then Spurt Centaur bounces back the Scarlet Bird back to hand. How do you get this rested? Well, we spoke about it before. Petite Ace allows you to force rest that rearguard, which is this. So you rest it, and then you put the Scarlet Bird behind. Scarlet Bird will restand this because of Scarlet Bird's ability, which then procs this to bounce the Scarlet Bird back. So that is pretty much one of the biggest roles with Spurt Centaur, and is pretty much one of your main combo pieces. The reason why I only run 3 is because it is the least impactful unit out of all of the combo pieces, because you're obviously talking about 2 grade 1s and a grade 0. But also, if you are using Shout, grade 2 is likely to win in comparison to grade 1s, so you are more inclined to run less grade 2s rather than less grade 1s, because the likelihood of you winning on a Shout contest is higher with a grade 2. So if you check this on Shout, it's quite likely that you win. Obviously, if your opponent checks a grade 3 or grade 4, then that's a different story. But you know, the probability is there as well. Then a card that, well, I guess let's talk about a card that pre-existed in the deck, and that is Bare Knuckle Arnest. So Bare Knuckle Arnest's ability is pretty useful, especially the first effect. So the first effect is Act Rearguard GB1, retire this unit, choose one of your rearguards and stand it. Multi-purpose card, you can stand Shouts for more Shouts. You can stand Spurt Centaur to bounce the unit in the same column back. And that is actually pretty important, which I didn't mention. Spurt Centaur could bounce Valtrosa, which means that you get to bottom deck another card the next time around, which means that you actually close the gap of your deficit between your deck and your opponent's deck count. So Arnest, multi-purpose card, obviously, like I said, but the second effect is auto when placed on rearguard, essentially. You can Soul Blast 1, rest this unit and one of your other rearguards, choose it to rest, and then if you pay the cost, then you draw 1. So really important, because in the early parts of the game, when you don't have your Petite Ace, or when you're trying to find your Petite Ace, this acts as a Petite Ace for your Spurt Centaur. What you do is you place Spurt Centaur in this, rest both of them, and you put the Valtrosa behind the Spurt Centaur to hopefully find one of your combo pieces. Then you use this to retire itself, stand the Spurt Centaur, bounce the Valtrosa back to hand, and it'll repeat again. So essentially you're having the ability to check 2 times in the top 5 to be able to get the combo pieces that you are missing. So very, very important card, but I only run 3 of it because it's not a main combo piece that you need. So yeah, that's pretty much the main reason. So the next card, which was not in Steven's initial list, and that is Spiral Breaker. So Spiral Breaker is a kind of like an early game Bengal, an early game Valtrosa, and essentially allows you to never get ride stuck, or if your hand is really good in the early game, it can find a ride target to ride instead. So what I mean by that is, when you're ditching this for the top 5 to search for a grade 2 or less, then you're essentially trying to find like Secondo or anything to ride other than your Shouts. So if your hand has like 2 Shouts, right, you're obviously wanting to ditch this to find another grade 1 to ride. Double Shout is pretty much auto win in the early game. So if you can get early Shouts and start shouting as early as turn 1, the game progresses much faster. Obviously, you know, if you lose, then that's good, because then you have the opportunity to get more soul for when you get to grade 3 and then do the full loop itself. So I found that, you know, running Spiral Breaker allowed me to get a lot of my combo pieces in the early game, which means that I don't need to forcibly dig for the combo pieces with Valtrosa. Really important, because sometimes Valtrosa eats up a lot of your CB in conjunction with your Spirit Centaur as well. It eats up your soul, and then if you have very little soul, very little counterblast, then you can't progress further with your loop. So how do I fix that? Is being able to find it earlier. So Spiral Breaker does that, and like I said before, it allows you to find ride targets as well, especially if your hand is absolutely busted, holding all 4 pieces of the loop. Then you're obviously wanting to find something else to ride as well. There was an application where this card did come up for the restand, and it was against my Deleter Messiah opponent in the last round of Swiss, or the second last round of Swiss. Essentially, pairing this with Merciless allowed me to restand a unit to proc Merciless's skill without the need of counterblast. So it allowed me to attack Merciless 3 times, which I think they were able to survive by 15k shield, which they drew off a draw trigger. So quite unlucky for me, but then again, still a nice application for a stride as well as busted as well. So Spiral Breaker's there. And then the main star of the show, the reason why this deck is alive and why I played it for Worlds, is Scream and Dancing Announcer Shout. This card is my favorite card in Nova Grappler. For the longest time, I've been wanting to play this particular card in a regional tournament or a Worlds tournament, and the fact that I got to use it at Worlds and coming 3rd place is, unforeseen. Let's just put it that way. So Shout is a very interestingly designed card, and it kind of plays like a mini game. So let's talk about the effect first. So act Rearguard Circle, rest this unit. You and your opponent reveal the top cards of your deck. If their grades are different, the fighter who revealed the higher grade draws a card, which means you draw the card that you revealed. And the fighter who revealed the lower grade soul charges 1, which means you soul charge the card that you revealed. If the grades are the same, then both players draw a card, which means both players add it to hand. So you're essentially drawing or soul charging the specified cards, and it is a very interestingly designed card, and it acts kind of like a minigame. So the whole purpose of this deck is kind of like figuring out puzzles, figuring out ways to be able to get your opponent to a position where they are unable to do anything. And what I mean by that is not decking them out, but more so getting their deck so low that they can't attack with the Vanguard, which means that they can only attack with rear guards, and because your hand is big, it doesn't matter, right? There is a situation where, Shout can start winning all of your grade 3 heals, and sometimes you get PGs and you get to a position where you can allow your opponent to attack your with their Vanguard, and then reducing their deck forcibly, and then guarding through that in that way. So Shout is a very interesting card, and I'm very glad that I'm able to play a tournament with this card, and it's my first time getting a top cut achievement with Shout. So yeah, it's a very interesting card. Your main card for the loop. Pretty much if you find 2 copies of this in the early game, you're winning. Obviously, depending on the matchup, if you're versing a Rads going second, then you don't really want to call it. But if you're versing a Rads going first and you have everything in your hand, then you're absolutely winning that game. So yeah, that is Shout. And then obviously the last combo piece is a Beast Deity Scarlet Bird. So order Rearguard Circle. When this is placed during your main phase, you can Soul Blast 1 stand all of your units, including the Vanguard. And if you stood 2 or more units, and if you have Beast Deity, White Tiger in Soul, which is your starter, draw a card. So obviously you place this behind the Spirit Centaur because you're forcibly resting that. So you rest the Spirit Centaur, you call this behind it, and then when this unit stands the Spirit Centaur, you Soul Blast 1, and then you bounce the Scarlet Bird back to hand. Other applications that this grade 1 fulfills is that in the drop zone, if your deck is low enough, you can start returning it, and then Valtrosa ends up becoming a counterblast 1 to find a Scarlet Bird. So this is probably your second most important piece in the whole loop. So being a grade 1 means that when you shout, it is likely to lose. So you obviously want to get more of this as soon as possible. Then the last grade 1 that we run is Obliging Monster Secondal. So the only reason why this card is there is to allow for more cards that return back to deck. This, in conjunction with Valtrosa, allows you to return combo pieces back to deck. Certain cards that you want to lose. So sometimes in this deck, you actually want to lose with Shout, because losing means that you get to Soul Charge, right? So you can return your Petite Aces, your starter even, back to deck. And because it being grade 0, it's likely to lose the Shout contest, right? And then Valtrosa obviously shuffles the deck, but essentially it gives me another option to be able to bottom deck outside of the only 4 Valtrosas that I run in the deck. So that's pretty much Secondo. Secondo is pretty much your main grade 1 ride the moment you get to turn 1. So if you ever find that, then great, you know, you're riding Secondo. Looking at the triggers, 4 heal guards. This is a very important guarding piece, and it is important because in the early game, when you are about to absolutely blast your opponent with, you know, the loop, sometimes you need to buy a turn. Staying down on grade 2 allows you to make this card essentially a perfect guard by reducing the crit by 2 on one of your opponent's attacks. So essentially threats get mitigated, but also heals are heals. Really important for your G guards, and especially if you have to live through one stride turn, then it allows you to draw 2 off the Counterblast 3 G guard as well. So yeah, this card has been pretty good. There are times where I win it with Shout in the early game, and then I essentially have this in hand, and my opponent's never winning because I'm always guarding through their turn. There was a situation where in the but the round 6 of Swiss, I versed the Leader Messiah. I stayed down. He went through 4 givens, and I had 2 copies of this, 2 PGs, and I guarded through a 4 given, like 4 Vanguard attack with 2 crit Cosmic Dawn's turn. So, you know, this card is actually crazy. So being able to guard through 4 Vanguard attacks with rear guard attacks, and my Vanguard is deleted, is pretty nuts, right? Without hitting OT, obviously. So that's the heals. As I explained before, I play 4 nulls. If you hit a draw trigger defensively, then it's good. You're drawing into your combo pieces, hopefully. But more so, you can actually get this against Fenrir in the early game, and then if they try to do the loop on the history collection stride, then you can freely PG. But more so, the draw is the important bit, right? Then we play 4 Red Lightning. Red Lightning is your counter charge 1 by putting it into Soul. Gives you a Soul, gives you a counter charge on demand without any cost to it. Whereas Sa Blauglands allows you to do the same thing, but it requires you to counterblast 1 first to counter charge 2. Pretty much all in all the same card, but SARS allows you to unlock in the Link Joker matchup, but that didn't matter because I don't think anybody brought Chaos Breaker or anything that forcibly locks. But Red Lightning, when you see this, if you win this on Shout, you feel really good because it allows you to counter charge 1, you get a free soul for no reason, and you just feel really, really good. Then the last card, the second last card is Sa Blauglands. Explained it before, allows you to unlock in the Link Joker matchup, but more so just being able to have a card that puts into Soul to counter charge 1 is really good. Then probably the most controversial card, and why people are asking, well, why do you run the purple OT? So the purple OT, I figured that this deck, right, if you're trying to win the deck trying to win the game normally, then you're actually going away from the purpose of this deck. So a lot of people was asking, well, you know, Grand Blue was pretty much stuck at grade 0. Why did you not attack normally in the top 8 game? And that is purely because of that. If my deck count gets too low and my opponent stays at their deck count, it actually puts you in a losing position. So you want to make sure that the gap is small enough for you to close with Valtrosa and with Secondo. But more so if, like, you know, you damage a Shout or a Scarlet Bird or Spirit Centaur or any of your combo pieces, and if you check this offensively within the first 3 turns, then you're able to get that, and it's also heal. Healing down means that you can buy a turn. That is really, really big, especially within the first 4 turns of the game. Usually when your opponent strides on first stride, you know, it's probably a history collection stride. And it's usually like, what, 5 to 6 attacks, mainly. Obviously, Victor can pull off a little bit more. But being able to heal down is really important in this deck. And more so, get a combo piece that is stuck in the damage. So that's that. I'm never looking to win normally with this deck, unless the situation calls for it. But the top 8 game against Grand Blue did not call for it because the player held 2 heal guards, and a lot of my triggers are 5Ks, which means that even if I pair with one of my other, you know, boosters or whatever, sometimes the 5K, if they drop double heal guard, then it actually puts them back in a position where they can, you know, get to grade 3 and then, you know, play a normal game, right? So yeah, that is the main deck. So let's just clean this up because we'll talk about the G-Zone and then we'll talk about the deck in its entirety and how kind of like the deck works. So let's start off with the most important stride, and that is Meteor Kaiser Victen. Without this card, essentially you're not getting Excel Circles because the only way you're getting it is a main phase stride. The on hit does not matter, but sometimes the on hit allows you to stand Spurt Centaur, which allows you to bounce something back to hand that is behind it. So that is a niche application as well. So Victen allows you to generate Excel Circles. I run one Merciless Dragon. Merciless Dragon is a way to be able to dig for your combo pieces. So sometimes what I do is I shout, I need like Petite Ace, Spurt Centaur, 2 of my combo pieces is not in my hand, and somehow I restand a rearguard, then I can cast 1, discard 2 cards that are not combo pieces in hope where the triple drive gets me the combo pieces, right? Combo pieces could also mean Valtrosa because Valtrosa digs for it. So Merciless allows you to filter your hand to get the combo pieces that you need. Obviously, there is its own application where you can just multi-restand like 5 to 8 times and just keep attacking with your opponent. And yeah, sometimes that just wins you games as well, especially if you check crit. The next one, which is a stride which I never thought existed, which is Demolition Beast Demosaurus. So the whole purpose of this card is it allows you to force rest rear guards, right? Which is really important when you're playing Spurt Centaur. Allows you to draw your card and to soul charge 1. The remaining abilities don't really matter. So being able to force rest rear guards means that you can force rest Spurt Centaur and maybe something else that doesn't really matter. But resting Spurt Centaur means that you can bounce the unit behind it if you end up restanding the Centaur with like Scarlet Birds or Petite Ace or your Onyx, right? But more so, you get to draw a card. Drawing a card means that you get to draw 1 towards your combo pieces, and then soul charging 1 is a very useful resource in the deck because you need essentially 2 soul per loop to be able to continue on, right? So Demolition Beast, very, very good. I still run the 1 Busted, just being able to Pentadrive on your first stride is really good, especially if your hand is like really defensive but you don't have any of your combo pieces, then hopefully you draw into them. You only run 1 because it's a intermediate stride just before you get to your looping phase. I run the 1 Harmonix Messiah. Harmonix, yeah, pretty much every deck has to run it. Really important, especially if your opponent tries to damage deny you. You can stride this, give yourself a damage and draw 1. The draw 1 might actually be really useful, but the counterblast 1 allows you to, you know, Valtrosa and use your Petite Aces to restand stuff as well. So sometimes I did find that I stride into this card quite a lot because my opponent damage denies me. But damage denying in this format means that you are not getting towards your win con, which is advantageous for a deck like mine because the slower the game goes, the better the outcome for this deck, right? Which means I can, you know, get towards my combo pieces, get my combo pieces that I need, and then loop you out of the game. So there is a missing stride because I had to give it back to one of my friends, and that is Asura Kaiser. So War DT Asura Kaiser. People are wondering why the hell I run this card, and it is because of the cost. So, act Vanguard. Once per turn, choose a grade 3 from your drop zone and put it to the top of the deck and shuffle your deck, right? The only purpose this card does is that it increments your deck by 1. And that is really important because if your deficit gap is too big, then obviously 1 extra card in deck makes it so that you close the gap. There has been a time where I did have to return a Radiance Caliburn back to deck because I used it to stride. And I think it was against Mega Colony in round 2 or round 3. I returned Radiance Caliburn, used the shout on the next turn after I won the Radiance Caliburn, and then the Radiance Caliburn allowed me to put it into Soul and counter judge 1. So really, really important that the Asura Kaiser allows you to return a card, which means it bridges the gap between your deck and your opponent's deck count. So that's that. Now looking at G-Guards, I run 1 Gundreed. I never really use this card, but it is really useful, especially if you CB3 draw 2 with your other G-Guard Stiffned. And it allows you to countercharge everything for the next turn so that you can use it to dig for your pieces and get to your loot. So Gundreed's there, and then I just spoke about it, and that is Stiffned. I run 2. Sometimes I find that I need to counterblast 3 to draw 2, but it's also a big G-Guard, especially if you are at 5 damage and you have 4 face down CB. You can just counterblast 1 and then it gains straight up 25k shield, so meaning a 40k shield. Really good, especially if you know your opponent is attacking for big. You can just CB1, well CB3, draw 2 first. Drawing 2 means that you can draw towards your combo pieces, but then if you have all face down damage, then you can counterblast 1 and it becomes a really, really big shield. So multi-purpose G-Guard, which is really good. I run 2 Dogen Titan. Dogen Titan is your flip fodder for Gundreed. Sometimes you can just, you know, if you have a lot of soul, you can soul plus 1 and then counter charge, really useful. It's just there as an option, but sometimes in the early game, you're kind of playing chicken and you don't have rear guards. It's immediately a 25k shield, which is really good. So that's pretty much like the early game role for this card. I play 1 Meteor Kaiser Junior. Junior allows you to countercharge 2 if all of your cards are face down. Really useful, especially if you're burning all CB3 for the draw 2 or CB4, CB5 to draw 2. So you can countercharge 2 on demand, and this card essentially gains 5k shield. On the flip side, if you don't have any soul, you burn your soul early because you need to essentially survive through a turn. You can immediately soul charge 2. This card is kind of like a double-edged G-Guard. Sometimes you have to count how many cards in your deck so that you don't deck out with the soul charge 2 or bridge the gap too far so that you can't come back. So yeah, Junior, pretty good G-Guard. And then I ran 3 Cray Elemental G-Guards. So one of them is Mixed Element Colburn. So this was a last minute inclusion. The reason why I played this card is if you are shouting in the early game and you're losing, that's a good thing, right? Because you're getting the soul. But it's a bad thing because you can't guard, you know, leading up to your opponent's first history collection stride. So how do I bridge that? So how do I make it so that I don't have hand, but I need quality shield, right? I can use this and it essentially becomes fat shield because my opponent's hand, they're winning shouts, which is great, you know? And if they're winning, their hand is huge. So I can just discard a card and then this becomes big enough to become essentially a perfect guard, right? You can get plus 5k for every 2 cards in your opponent's hand. So if your opponent's, you know, sitting there with 12, 14 card hand, this gains plus 35k shield, 50k shield guard, which is really, really good. And a lot of your cards are like low shield value anyway, so you can just discard a 5k and then that 5k essentially becomes plus 20, plus 30k shield. I only run 1 because it only needs to get me to the next turn, and then, you know, loop, right? So I run Light Element A Gleam. A Gleam allows me to discard a card from my hand and draw 1. Really useful, especially if I am missing combo pieces. That is essentially the main role. And then Dismal, for some reason, if, you know, my board, I have to stop the loop and then loop on the next turn, and go like a half loop, then sometimes my cards are stuck in the front row. You can just drop a Dismal and then your opponent stops attacking it. So yeah, Dismal, very, very good. So yeah, that's pretty much the main deck and the G zone. So I guess I'll show you kind of how the loop works. So let me just get out Victor, because you need that as a Vanguard to get the excels. And then I've got my two big boys, Shout and Scarlet Bird. So essentially, right, let's just say we put a bunch of cards in Soul because it matters. So each loop requires 2 Soul. So essentially you have one column where you have Spirit Centaur, and then you have another column where you have all your shouts, and then you have a Petite Ace. So Petite Ace and Shout can be interchanged between each of their columns, which is fine. And then you have a Scarlet Bird in hand. So what you do is you use Petite Ace to rest Spirit Centaur. Then you use Shout to contest the top card of your deck. If it's equal, then you add it to hand. If it's lower, you put it in Soul. If it's higher, you put it into hand, right? And then let's just say, you know, you finish with your stuff, and then you play Scarlet Bird. Scarlet Bird skill will Soul Blast 1 to stand all of your rear guards, and because this stood by an effect, you can Soul Blast 1 again, and then bounces back to hand. So essentially, the more shouts that you have, the likelihood of you losing Shout is higher, right? There is another play where I did mention previously is with Valtrosa, right? Let's just say you had like Valtrosa and maybe like Arnest or anything that restands, right? So what you could do is you could use Petite Ace to rest, call the Valtrosa in hope that, you know, you get your combo pieces or whatever, or if you want to recycle back to deck, and then you play the Arnest. The Arnest retires itself to stand Spirit Centaur. Spirit Centaur then Soul Blasts 1 and then bounces the Valtrosa back to hand. So Spirit Centaur is multi-purpose. It can bounce you, obviously, Valtrosas. It can bounce you your Secondals, which means that you bridge the gap between your deck and your opponent's deck. And then obviously the main combo with Scarlet Bird. So essentially the loop requires you to have all 4 of these cards, and then obviously multiple copies of Shout. The more copies of Shout, the better the loop becomes. Pretty much if you have 4 Shouts, you tell your opponent to pack it up and you just win the game, right? You do have to be careful with the deck size, as I mentioned before, but usually when it gets to that point, then you want to change the Scarlet Bird and then loop with Valtrosa instead, because then you can, you know, rest this, stand this, and then bounce the Valtrosa back so that you increment your deck without calling anything from your deck, which means that, let's just say your opponent is a differential of 8 cards in deck, then playing this means it's 7, and then let's just say you bounce it with Spirit Centaur, then you play it again, you return 2 cards, which means the differential becomes 6, and then you just keep doing it as you go. If you have multiple copies of Petite Ace, what you could do is you rest, you use the CB1, rest this, stand this to bounce this, and then retire the Petite Ace, and then you obviously play the other Petite Ace from hand to rearguard, and then here you're back at the same position, right? The loop, yes, you can do it with no Excel circles. So if you ride like your Heal Guardian, you can still pull it off, but it becomes significantly harder because you don't have access to more than 2 shouts at any given time. So that's like the only drawback. But man, if you have like double shout in the early game and you're just shouting, and you have like a lot of soul already, then it actually could be possible that you just pull it off, right? So yeah, that is pretty much the deck. I'll just switch to another screen. So let's just talk about, I guess, my matchups throughout the day. I vaguely remember most of it, and just kind of discuss how I prepared for this event. So the first round, I ended up pairing into Angel Gizeh. Angel Gizeh is a really good matchup for you for this deck because essentially it goes through its own deck forcibly, right? Because it needs to flip the Xerath Dragons. So letting your opponent do that is good for you because you don't really need to care about the deck difference very much, because usually they burn through their deck way quicker than you do normally, right? Just by, you know, attacking, triple drive, check, check, check. So pretty much once they get to Gizeh, their deck just becomes super low, and it's very low effort for you to get the loop off, right? So you have the 4 loop units, and then you have multiple shots, and then you just shut them out of the game. So that was Angel Gizeh. Second round, I versed Mega Colony, I think. Mega Colony is a weird matchup because it runs High Class Moth, but High Class Moth is only once per turn. So I think I got to a position where my hand was perfect to guard through the 5 attacks with Mythiarch. So it had the double Delphina and go into Gridora or whatever. And then I hard stuck them at 0 damage and never gave them 2, because if they get 2, they go into Optorandus. And then pretty much when they get to Optorandus, I just lose, right? So I hard stuck them at 0, forcibly asked them to use Harmonics if they want to damage, or the Heal Guardian. And then I think the Mega Colony player ended up healing down to 0. So then I stayed at 0. They gave themselves 1 and never got 2 CB to use Optorandus. So it got to a point where we just like drew pass. But then I think the Mega Colony player ended up realizing that I shouted more than they returned cards back to deck. And then each time I shout, I just get Valtrosas, or I draw for turn, I get Valtrosa and bottom deck a card, and then it pretty much goes through the deck, right? So yeah, that is pretty much how that matchup went. Third round, I think I played against Will Peng, and that was Dieliner. So Dieliner is a pretty good matchup for you because a lot of their deck is grade 3, so you're losing shouts. Losing shout is good, right? Losing shout means that you get soul so that you can continue the loop. So if you verse decks like Highlander, high grade 3, grade 4 count, which means that you're more likely to lose on shouts. So it's a pretty normal game. I drew my OT, which allowed me to guard through a double linker turn. I think they had the restand Laurel, and then will essentially attack with Unibird. Didn't have the 100k, I think it was like 80 something. Hard guarded that, cool, and then passed turn, drew my turn, straight into Harmonics, gave myself a damage, and then looped him out of the game. So that was DP. Round 4 was against DI, and DI is a really good matchup because it soul charges. Similar to Angel Gizeh, it goes through its deck by itself. It got to a point where they were using an M1 engine and then using Fuginlin to put a card from my hand into soul and draw 1, which is really advantageous because it gets me a soul and it gets me a chance to get towards my combo piece. And then they used Ron Ginlin, which is the grade 2, which forcibly asks me to put a card from my rigger into soul or allow them to soul charge 1 extra. There was a time where I just gave them the extra soul charge, going through an extra deck, and then got to my turn, I looped them out again. So the deck size didn't matter in that respect because they were burning through their deck more than I did, and that was that. Round 5 was against Ned. That game was very favorable to Ned. I pretty much didn't get anything. I used my cyclers to get PGs and heal. Oh, sorry, PGs, and then I drew Heal Guardians. So I wanted Ned to ride up to grade 3 and then loot me straight away. I could defend through all that and then just win the game. But he rode up to Fenrir, went into the on-stride for Genesis, and got nothing. So he didn't loop at all. And then at that point, I didn't have any of my combo pieces at all. I think I had like 1 Scarlet Bird, and that was pretty much it. So he got to Amaruda and then destroyed me. So lessons learned for that one. Then round 6 was against the Leader Messiah. So this was a really scuffed game. So I had pretty much everything in hand except I think I was like only on 1 CB, I think. And it was a little bit odd. So I didn't have a Victor. I didn't have a Victor grade 3, which was really annoying. So if I had a Victor grade 3, I would have just rode up and then just looped and then build my hand big enough so that I could guard through a Cosmic Dawn. But then I looked at my hand and I'm like, well, I hold 2 heals and 2 PGs. Maybe I could just stay down on grade 2, get deleted, and then go through their Cosmic Dawn, and so I did. So that was a weird game because they went through, I think, 4 givens, restored the Vanguard 3 times, had 4 Vanguard attacks, and I went through double PG, double heal. And then I got to grade 3, I had a Victor, created 2 XLs, attacked them once, and then they Barrier End. Barrier End went down, I had a PG, a third PG to guard that. And then it got to a point where I had to Merciless the next turn, and their hand was like 4 or 5, I think it was like 5. And then I checked the crit on Merciless, which meant that they went from 2 to 4. But then I checked a third crit and decided to put the crit on the Vanguard. And then the 5th damage was a draw. And then the draw ended up giving them a 15k shield, which allowed them to guard through my turn. So I had 3 Merciless attacks. And then, yeah, they just had just enough. And then I was like, well, you know, if you get to your next turn, you just win. So lost there. And then round 7 in Swiss, which is really unfortunate, I actually versed Steven, so the person who gave me the framework of the deck. I absolutely high rolled him. So I think I started with 1 shout with the 3 other combo pieces. I shout into a shout, which I ended up winning. I think he checked a Gerald Hawk or something. So then I ended up having 2 shouts. And then midway through, I used a Valtrosa, got a 3rd shout. And then that shout ended up checking a shout. And then I ended up winning that, getting me a 4th shout. And I got to the end, the deck differential was about 6. So I had to contest a little bit. So, you know, 1 by 1, you know, Valtrosa puts a bottom, shout, check the top. If I win, then add it to hand. And I won pretty much all of them. So it made the deck differential much, much easier. So I was 5-2 at this stage, the highest 5-2, and I think there were 4 5-2s that made it to the top cut. So I ended up in 5th seed, versing a Grand Blue in top 8, which you guys would have seen on the world stream. Pretty unfortunate for Danny. They were on grade 0, tried to G-assist, I attacked, guarded with a Honolly, G-assisted again, failed. Critted me by putting a booster behind the Vanguard. And then I got to the Vic 10 stride and chose to only attack with Vic 10 because the cards that I checked in Danny's hand was double heal and a lot of defensive cards. So I wasn't able to bridge the offensive gap, especially if they used a 10k, well, 15k heal to give 10k to the Vanguard. So I decided, you know, let's just roll it out a little bit and then see how it goes. Ended up giving me like, I think 4 damage or something. Got to Valtrosa on the next turn and looped them out of the game. It got very close because the last Valtrosa, I had to think about the card that I returned. Initially, I thought of returning Valtrosa. And I told Danny, hey, let me think about the card that I'm returning before I move into any further actions. And I realized that I had 2 souls. So I just returned a Scarlet Bird, used the Valtrosa to call the Scarlet Bird. The Scarlet Bird restored all of my shouts and the Centaur. Used the 2 soul that I had. Used the 2 soul that I had. 1 for Scarlet Bird, 1 for Centaur. Bounce the Valtrosa back to hand. Valtrosa increments my deck by 1, which meant that the deck size was even. So then I shouted, went down to 1 and then passed 10 and 1. So that was that. Then top 4 versus Ned. We, I think, agreed that whoever won our match would be world champion, and so it did. That game was very close. A lot of my recyclers, so Valtrosas and Secondals, ended up losing, which meant that it was soul charged. So I didn't end up winning any of my recyclers. And then at one point I checked the recycler count and all 7 were out. So I was like, well, I have no way of coming back into this. And unfortunately, you know, that's how my my run ended. Really would have liked to hit finals because I think I had a really good shot into Victor. And then played 3rd and 4th, I versed Gabriel Tan from Singapore. My hand was so busted, it was like double shout. I had to ride a shout, call a shout to rearguard, shout once. Got a Scarlet Bird, drew for turn, then turn 2, which was a shout, double shouted. And then at one point, got to turn 3, created 2 excels, shouted again, got a third shout, and he got Finessa. So we both won, added both to hand. So I had triple shout, and then got to a point where I think I like shouted into shout again, ended up winning, and then getting a 4th shout. So very advantageous into Highlander, and then pretty much looped him while he was on grade 2 and out of the game. So yeah, that's pretty much the deck and my run for this whole World Finals. Ended up playing Vanguard the next day and hitting top 16 as well. But it was just such a surreal experience. I never would have thought I would play a deck like this, and you know, it paid dividends for the amount of testing that I went through. But yeah, absolutely amazing deck. Highly recommend you guys try it before it gets banned. It will most likely get banned along with Fenrir. 2 extremely unfair decks, and the deck itself is very fun. It's about, you know, finding puzzles, trying to figure out things, and you know, find the little loopholes, and sequencing. Highly intensive on sequencing. So if you do something before something else and that was incorrect, then it actually punishes you. So very good deck to learn sequencing if you guys are looking for that as well. So yeah, that's pretty much it for my deck profile. I've been rambling on for I think nearly an hour now, so I'm gonna let you guys get on with your day, or if you guys are listening to the background, hope you guys enjoyed it. If you guys like this video, pop a like, comment down below what you guys think about the deck. If there's anything that you would change, please let me know. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Subscribe if you haven't, click that button down below. Thank you very much. Peace.